Welcome everyone to another Domo Lunch and Learn. I am joined by Dan Hendriksen, our good friend over there at the Business Strategy and Growth Department, Director of Business Strategy and Growth here at Domo. Lots of folks joining. So as you are watching, this is meant to be a little bit more of an interactive session, as Dan and I are going to just kind of have an open discussion. Dan mostly will chat about all things workflow in Domo. But if you have questions or you want to interact with Dan at all, or just want to give a cool story or let us know where you're from, put those in the comments and chat section. Actually, that away, I believe, on the live stream where you are watching. So appreciate everybody joining us. Dan, thank you again. A fan favorite here on the live stream. Already comments coming in. Our good friend Jim, my boss, is excited about this feature. So when I saw this presentation, figure I should get ahead of the curve. Jim, stay with us and make sure you ask any questions that might be helpful for your boss. That's what we're here for. Dan, thanks again.
Yeah, I love it. No, thanks for having me. Jim, love the excitement. I got to tell you, so I've been here at Domo. I was here before we had data flows, right? You all know they use Domo, how critical data flows are to anything that happens. And I think workflows is, I don't think there's anything that's excited me in the product release as much as workflows has. I mean, I think it's going to be that big and that transformative and impactful for users of Domo. So Jim, I share your boss's excitement. I'm pumped about it, and I'm excited to see and hear more cool stories about all the awesome things that you guys automate using workflows. So again, Eddie, thanks for having me. As I was thinking about the session today, I go back to when the idea of workflows in Domo was first presented to me, and all the thoughts that went through my mind. And then as I gained familiarity with the tool, what was helpful for me and kind of wrap my head around what I can do, when it makes sense to use it, I thought I'd share some of those concepts and and some common categorical uses for workflows that we see. And we can dive in and look at some, and have got some cool stories that would weave in there. But does that sound good to you, Eddie?
Yeah, sounds fantastic. Dan, obviously working in the office today, looks great. So many folks we see remotely, but I love to see the views of the office. So take it away, man. When you're ready, share.
Yeah.
Again, as anybody has questions, comments, suggestions, cool stories you want to share with Dan during this session, this is interactive. Use the live chat, use the comments section below. We'll be happy to dive into those as we go. Thanks again, Dan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, please keep the dialogue coming. So, for those of you that saw the session at Domopalooza, this concept won't be new to you, but I want to hit on it really quick. When we think about the use cases that we've got for Domo, and what we use Domo for, it's really all about informing people so that they can take action, right? And some use cases, live and die at just providing a little bit of insight, right? It could be just look back at historical information. We've got other things where we do want to alert users so that they can know right now. And then we see a lot of people developing intelligent action using Domo apps. Workflows extends that thing a little further into the world of automation, which I think is awesome. Any business process that you've got is a prime candidate for automation with workflows. And one of the ways that I kind of got started with it is I started thinking through, we've got all these use cases for Domo. And when I think of a use case for Domo, I think of, we have a dashboard, we've got a card, we've got an app. Like, why was it built, right? I consider that a use case, right? And when I think about where we make a time investment in leveraging a workflow, this concept was really helpful for me in evaluating frequency and value, right? As you think through your different use cases, things that are happening with a high level of frequency and have a high level of value are ideal candidates for automation. The next place I'm going to come down and look is lower value but high frequency tasks. I mean, that almost might be a better place to get some quick wins than that upper right, because these are menial tasks that people are doing a lot, right? And if we can get people away from menial and focusing on meaningful things, I think everybody wins. So is you kind of plot your use cases out. These are the two areas where I'm going to look and I'm going to spend my time. But when we see categorically what use cases come up, and we'll look at some examples of these, it's predominantly categorized one of these 6 ways, right? It's back end of an app, it's governance, it's data pipeline orchestration, it's IoT or event triggered actions. Think of that as exception management, work ticket queues, and then really just general automation. And I'll jump in. We'll dive into the product. I'll show a couple of workflows that I've built, that I use in my world. We'll show some that we've borrowed from customers, and we'll tell a couple of stories. But one thing that I want to share. Let me stop sharing here really quick, and then we'll reshare with the product. When we think about what our users do with the insights and the information they get inside of Domo, I had a really cool use case come up the other day where a customer who got started with workflows, they had a dashboard and they had a big team of people that would go look at it every day. And the dashboard basically it had a couple of columns. One showed all the things that they were overseeing that were on track. And one showed all the things they were overseeing that needed some form of attention for one reason or another. Now, I don't want to get into too much detail because it is proprietary information of theirs. But what I want to highlight is that people would go look at this dashboard, and and the whole reason they went to look at it is they would look for which things appeared in this section on the right, which needed to take some action. All right, and for the managerial team, they had no way to know. When you think about the manager's view, they can see 4 or 5 people's worth of actions that need to be taken. They don't know if those actions are being taken. They don't know what's going on, and it was still a process that was incumbent upon someone going and looking at that to take that action, which could occur ideally, throughout the business day, but sometimes maybe somebody gets busy and they don't look at it that day. And so we pivoted, and what we've done now is, instead of presenting all the items that someone needs to take action on the right side of this dashboard, we automatically start initiating the required actions with a workflow, right? So think of it this way. Let's pretend that, well, we don't even need to pretend. Whatever occurs in the data that would surface it is something that needs attention. Let's use that as a trigger to initiate a workflow, right? Could be that something's behind schedule, right? This should have happened yesterday and it didn't. Instead of having me have to go look at that, initiate a workflow and let that workflow go through and use logic to determine which people need to be notified, which prompts we need to give. In a lot of cases for them, there were things that they could just automatically redo, right? Hey, when the agent sees these types of items, then we need to do these types of actions. And the dashboard moved from this hit list of things they need to do to more of a command center or control center where they could see all of the different things that are in flight, right? And what's happening. So when we talk about taking action and automation, I thought that was a really cool story. And we're seeing more similar examples of that. I'm going to share my screen out, and I want to talk through a couple of different scenarios and show you guys some workflows. So let's share this browser out here. All right, looks good. This is MotoCorp. It's our demo environment, and you can see we've got a lot of clutter in here as folks use it for lots of different things. But one of the things that I'll show this to you in Domo. This is our production version of Domo, and let me hurry and get off of there before I show anything proprietary. But I have, we're big users of Domo here at Domo. We eat our own dog food, and I have a ton of pages and a ton of content inside of Domo that I know is old, right? And we've got a process or an exercise that we go through every year. We call it the 12 days of data. and my friend Tyson puts this on, and he builds a dashboard, and he shows everybody all of the orphaned content, right? Data sets that don't power cards or data flows, cards that aren't viewed, pages. we've got a different exercise we do every day. I think that's going to look a little different now that we've got workflows. But anyways, what I wanted to do is I said, hey, I know I got a bunch of content. I need to clean it up. This I would classify, by the way, as a governance related task, right? We talked categorically about those where use cases fall. I would call this a governance related task, but I think it's one that we can all relate to. And I just run this one manually, but I want to find all the pages that I haven't looked at. And the time period I chose was 120 days. Obviously, you can do whatever you want. That's the beauty of a tool like this. But I wanted to find all of those pages and prefix the title with flagged for deletion. At some point in the near future, I'm going to go through and I'm going to take all the pages that are flagged for deletion and I'm going to delete those, and then I'll have another process goes through and cleans up the orphaned cards. But I wanted to walk you through exactly what I'm doing here. So when this workflow starts, what it does is it looks into our activity log, right? So you guys are likely all familiar with the activity log. It's a data set that gets used often, but essentially what I'm doing is I'm querying that data set and I'm looking for actions of viewed and objects of pages, and I'm sorting by the date, and I'm grouping and grabbing the max event date, and I'm returning a list of all the pages that haven't been viewed in 120 days or more. Now, I've got a couple of tasks here. I'm initializing an iterator that I'm going to use a little further on. I'm counting the length of that list to see how many pages there are that I need to modify. And at this point, I've got a decision here in my workflow where it says, hey, are there any pages to modify, right? If there's nothing for it to do, then it just shoots me an email and it says, hey, your environment's clean. There's not needing for us to clean up, and the workflow ends. If there are pages to modify, and we know that because the list length, right, that query we ran earlier returned more than one record or more, then what I do is I loop through here now and I grab the page ID, the page title, and I run a function that I wrote. It was super easy. I'm not a developer. I put that together, and that's globally available for everybody now. But grabs the page ID, the page title, and it changes the page title and appends it with this prefix flagged to delete. And then it determines, are there more pages to modify, right? And we know that because we're looking at this little iterator, which we're incrementing each time we go through this loop, and we're evaluating that against the list length, right? So let's pretend that I've got a dozen pages. What this is going to do is the workflow is going to loop through this thing a dozen times. It's going to prefix all those pages with flagged for deletion. And then once that's done, it's going to go down this path and it's going to send me a note that tells me, hey, Dan, there were 12 pages that were modified, and the workflow ends. So an idea or an example of a workflow that I'm personally using to help clean up content inside of our Domo environment. Now, I've seen customers do similar things with going through and handling inactive users, removing cards that are no longer being viewed. There's all sorts of different use cases for this. We've even seen, and I've actually got an example of it here that I can show, but we've even seen where customers, this was an example where customers going through and they're finding inactive users inside of their product, right? And what it's doing is it's then notifying them, hey, your account is not been used. It's flagged for deletion. And then waiting a few days, right? Giving them an opportunity to take some activity and notifying them up to 3 times, right? Once they've been notified 3 times with 3 days between each of those notifications, then we go through, we give somebody an opportunity to review any accounts that are flagged for deletion if they want to, grant some exemptions, right? They know that a user is not active, but for whatever reason they want to keep it. They're of some high strategic value. This gives them the opportunity to do that. But then it goes through and it deletes those inactive accounts. So a cool example of a governance-related workflow, and a really common pattern we see where we're identifying things, we're taking action based on those and looping through that. Another one that I want to show you guys I really like, and we'll play through and tease this one out. Stole this from a customer. The workflow is it's called IoT device checking. In this case, this customer has got refrigeration units that they need to query, and they need to make sure that they're online and that they're working correctly because they got produce in them, right? And they don't want the produce to go bad. Now, I don't want you to over rotate or give too much thought to the fact that they're refrigerators and it's produce, because I'm guessing most people here don't have refrigerators and aren't in the produce business, right? But what I do want you to focus on is something occurring within the data and having that something pass the relevant information into a workflow and having that workflow go out and do something. Right, so that's what I want you to focus on. But when we look at the examples here, this workflow is triggered by an alert, and I'll actually create an alert. I'll go through and I'll show you exactly how it works. But this workflow is triggered by an alert, and what it does is that alert is triggered when there's a value in data set that says that a refrigerator is too warm. Right, they've got a secondary sensor in there. It's too warm. Throws a webhook to our webhook connector. The webhook connector then triggers an alert every time a new row is added, passes the values here. And what this workflow does is it goes and it pings that refrigeration unit to see if hey, are you online or are you offline, and what is the temperature, right? So you can see this particular service task takes a device ID and it returns a temperature, a status, and then this row string is something that we added to make it demonstrable without us actually having a fridge. But we actually write those results to a data set for historical and logging purposes. And then we determine if the device is active. And if it's not, then we create a ticket for a technician to go out and perform a repair or diagnosis on the machine, right? It populates that form with all the necessary information. And we'll show you what that looks like. And it allows the technician to provide his notes and response, his or her. And we know this is a time-sensitive task, right? So if a technician doesn't get out there within an hour, then we're going to bail out and we're going to send a notification to management. But assuming they do, we're going to evaluate the technician's response and see if it indicates that the device was repaired or not. If it was not repaired, we notify management. If it was repaired, then we loop back through here. We validate the repair, we log the value, and if the device is indeed active, then the workflow ends. If it's not, then this process continues. So here's what I'll show you. Let me jump over to this data set.
Hey, Dan, before we move on here, Eddie. Incredible stuff. I mean, that's super cool. We've got people in the chat chatting about it a little bit. Jim, our good friend who started us off, is probably getting ahead, but it sounded like you said you had another workflow that can delete pages you've tagged. Can that be extended to data flows and data sets? ?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jim, the cool thing about these service tasks, right, is the service task just runs a little snippet of code, right? I'm not a developer at all. That function for manipulating the pages that I wrote is right here. It's page manipulation, and it literally, I mean, it's 3 lines of code. It takes the page ID, the page title, and the prefix, and it pushes that to an endpoint. So if we don't already have a global function to delete a data flow or rename a data flow, it's something that could be handled in a matter of minutes. We did not have one to change a page title. This probably took me, again, not a developer. I'm going to give away one of my secrets. I did get a little help from Chat GPT, but I was able to put this function together. So yeah, Jim, absolutely, we could do it with data flows and data sets.
Jim continues here about workflows being shared, and this was kind of a sentiment that was repeated by our good friend Mark Snodgrass. Essentially, a lot of these workflows, or some of these workflows that you're sharing, at least the common ones, could be extremely helpful, especially these governance related ones. Is there any plans to kind of make these available or share these outside of what you guys are building, whether that be in the App Store or in kind of the community instance?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love the thought of building them in the community instance is yeah, we can absolutely do that. I don't see any reason why we can't do that like, this week, next week, so that you guys can see those examples. I'll have to think through if there's anything there that I'm not catching. But to answer the broader question, yes, we do plan to get them in the app store and to have them to where some of these common patterns can be grabbed. So, for example, if you want to do some sort of exception management, right? We'll have a workflow built that you can deploy and then just wire up these specific service tasks to what you need to do. We're just not quite there yet. We're waiting on a couple of things from the App Store team, but that's something that we should have here in the next couple of quarters.
Awesome.
And I do agree with you guys that it is a need.
Yeah, I love that. Mark asked a separate question, which again, this session is interactive, so keep the questions coming. We don't feel like I'm throwing Dan off on anything. We prepared this one where it was just going to be like, hey, let's keep it open. Let's see if people have questions. Let's see if people have thoughts, things people want to see. We'll just be flexible. So Mark asked, can you talk about building in the testing process that you go through when building a workflow? What does that look like without sending out actual notifications, etc.?
Yeah, it's good question, Mark. And it was I had the same question when I was initially getting started. So with everything, and let's go to a workflow really quick that I can edit, one that I'm working on, so that I can show you what that looks like. So you do have the ability. Let's look at this one to test everything, right? So for example, this is a pretty simple one where I'm passing in a date and I'm wanting to convert it to a string, but I can hit test. I can see the console. It'll just run here locally and it shows me what that result looks like, right? So when it comes to things like a notification, I always set myself as the target destination initially for testing and ensuring that notification looks right and includes all the information that I need or want it to. So I'll test it in the console, make sure that it looks good. Then I'll actually run it and send it to myself. Again, further validation that it's doing exactly what I want it to. And then I'll incorporate the dynamic recipient in the case of a notification. Yeah, it's good question. And Mark, I'll be curious to get your feedback on that process. One thing I'll say too, and Eddie, we'll get a link to this and drop it in the chat. I'll see if I can go find it right now. But I did create a video called "Getting Started with Workflows," and the idea behind it was, hey, you got workflows turned on. Like, now, what do you do, right? And I share some best practices. And in the video, it's about 35 minutes long. In the video, I actually go through and build a workflow from scratch. And I kind of model it out and I get it running. And I think there's some things in there that you'll find helpful and insightful that can hopefully save you some of the pain that I went through. I know this might be a little bit unconventional, but I'm going to send you a link to where anybody inside or outside of the company can view it right in where it's stored right now in OneDrive. Okay. I know that it's out there in a better way. I just don't know the best way to get it to everybody. So Eddie, I just dropped that link in the private chat. I'll let you do your thing to share it with everyone.
Yep. It's out there in the world now. Yeah, it's in our comments and chat section. What about documentation, Dan? We working on documentation for this? Obviously, our good friend Scott, who's watching. Do we have any documentation coming?
Yeah, Scott, great question. So when you get into the workflows tool, right, when you hit more, you pop into workflows, it lands you on this screen, and right here at the top, we've got a link to this here, learn more. Now, a couple things I'll say about the documentation is It's quite thorough. This Word doc was over 100 pages when we converted it to the format to get it here in this Domo support environment. I do see a need for us to get it in more of a wiki format where it's a little bit more easily searchable, and like you see with some of our other documentation. But with it, the product in its beta state, this is what we've got. It is really, really thorough, and that's how you can find it right there from that Learn More button at the top of the workflows page. I'll also drop this in case somebody wants to look at it and you don't have workflows enabled in your environment. I just dropped that link in the private chat, Eddie, so you can distribute that.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan.
I know that we're coming up on time. I want to just take a moment and tie back to showing you guys, creating a value in this. And there's a couple of things I want to show you. I want to show you what this technician unit repair request looks like, right? So when we prompt a user to do something, and how this anomaly in the data occurring, initiating a workflow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our data center, and I'm going to find my IoT devices data set. Now you can see that I've got an alert created here, and when that alert triggers, I'm initiating a workflow, right? And one thing that's neat here is you can, this particular workflow requires a few parameters to start, and I'm mapping those alert values to those necessary parameters, right? So when I shared that customer story earlier about anomaly occurring in the data, values from this alert are passed into the workflow, so the workflow can use those values to make some decision logic, right? So very, very cool things happening there. But let's do this. I need to, again, I don't have I got to talk to somebody at facilities about this to see if I can really get us a fridge that we can have online that we can fix and break repeatedly. But since I don't, I'm just using this DDX brick to indicate whether my fridge is broken or not. So we'll go ahead and disable our fridge, and I'm going to add a record to this data set so you can see what that process looks like. And we'll just give it a nonsensical ID. We'll say the name is the Domo Community Freezer, and it's in the Domo community, right? We'll just put whatever values we want to here. So in this, again, in the customer example that we borrowed, that value would get in there through a webhook, right? The webhook connector, secondary sensor determines the temperature is above 35.5 degrees, so it fires that webhook off. And that alert that we can see triggered for the Domo Community Freezer initiated a workflow. And that workflow, I'll go back and replay it in just a moment, but it went and it looked, and it found that the fridge was disabled. And so it created a repair task for a technician, right? If we look at, let's just look at this again, right? Is the device active? No. Unit repair request, right? So if I come here and I go to our queues, we can see that there are 2 open tasks for refrigeration unit repair, right? And if we look at this, we can see the Domo Community Freezer, unit ID 12355565564, and the Domo community is broken, right? So technicians get alerted. This could be, this isn't assigned to anybody currently. It could be assigned to a particular technician that's on duty, but I'm going to say, freezer door was propped open by an ice cream cone. Doesn't matter what it is. I, reset the unit, close the door, and I was able to repair it. Now, we'll go actually fix our fridge, right? So the technician did do his thing. Now I hit submit. It passes those values, those responses from that technician back to that workflow. And that workflow is going to go on and do all the other conditional things that it has based on the responses that I provided. So again, I know you guys aren't all in the produce business. You don't have freezers, but just pretend it's an anomaly in the data. Someone needs to go do something. They need to make some sort of a response, take some sort of an action. And this is what that looks like. So if I go back to our workflow, this is one other cool thing I want to show you guys. I can go to an instance list and I can see every time it ran, right? We can see that today it's ran twice. And here is the most recent example of when it ran. Now I've sped up this playback, but you can see if I can click on these and I can see every single time what happened, right? So this workflow triggered for the Domo community freezer and the Domo community with this unit ID, right? And then I can go back through and I can see what happened with every single one of these, right? It pinged the refrigeration unit. It got this status back. It got this temperature back. We can go through and we can see the device was inactive. So we prompted a technician to do something, right? And we can see the notes that I put in here, right? Freezer door was propped open by an ice cream cone. We closed the door. Since I indicated that the device was repaired, it went down this path, and we determined that now the device is in fact active, and so our workflow concluded. So just an example of an alert being caused by some anomaly or something occurring in the data. You all know that with data set alerts, you can get really robust and prescriptive in exactly what initiates that alert and what values can be included in that alert. Kicking off a workflow, it ultimately culminated in an action of a technician needing to go out and make a repair. For you, it could be initiating a process in another system. It could be notifying somebody of something they need to do. In this example, this technician filled out a form because there were multiple responses that we wanted from the technician. If it was a simple approve, decline, yes, no, big, small, whatever type of response, if it's a binary singular response, we could also just include that question in an email and provide buttons that a user could click on to provide a response. But I feel like this does a good job of kind of showing the power of an anomaly in the data causing a process to kick off that notifies a person who takes an action. And we've got examples of this we could talk through all day. Eddie, I'll let you call the shots on whether we keep going or we wrap it up. You put a quarter in me this morning.
We always keep going. Nolan, thank you for joining. We got new people joining us on the Lunch and Learns, which I love. Can I use workflows to update write back data into an ERP, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got some really cool examples of that. You can write it to any system that's got an API that we can communicate with, right? So one example that I'll share with you, Nolan, is we have a customer. I can't mention them by name, but it's a financial institution, and they have, similar to what I just showed, an exception management use case where if they see a trade that occurs that meets certain criteria, it gets flagged for review. And once an individual reviews that, right, maybe it comes across and based on the security and the exchange and the value, whatever, somebody reviews it. And once that person says, hey, it's approved or it's denied, it actually reaches out to not Domo, but the system that clears those trades, right, and lets that system know, yep, Eddie looked at it. It's all good. Whatever criteria they want to include in that for logging purposes. And Domo hands that information off to that external system. So we're writing different values to different systems all the time.
That's incredible. Well, if anybody has any additional questions, get them in quick, because this is where Eddie starts to wrap up the session. So if you do have any additional questions, put them in the chats or comments section. Dan, thanks again. Fan favorite. When we talked about let's just do something general on workflows. Let's just sit down and have a conversation. We had a ton of engagement in the chat. Thank you guys for joining on that. More details to come. We have another virtual community monthly meetup happening in May. So we're wrapping up those details, getting all of the fine print checked off before we release that. But really excited to do another one of those. We just wrapped up our previous one. You can find all of this content on our community pages, either past events or new events. But Dan, thanks for joining us on another Lunch and Learn. Can't wait to have you back. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, one thing I'll say in closing too, you know what would make my day? I'm going to come out and visit a lot of you guys, these connections tours in a few weeks. Nothing would make me happier than one of you to come and say, hey, I saw your thing in the community. You shared an example. Check out this workflow I built. Jim, maybe it's you and you're telling me this awesome new thing that your boss is in love with. So I'll be spending a lot more time, not only with Eddie here, but also in person out at some of our events this year, and would love to make your acquaintance and hear the cool things you're doing.
Yeah, we're super excited to spin those connection tours back up. Always a great time when we get to meet in person. Thanks again, Dan. Thanks everybody for joining us. Another Lunch and Learn coming up. I will actually be traveling this coming Tuesday, so there will be no Lunch and Learn on Tuesday. I know everybody will be sad. Now that we're all meeting in person again, Eddie's on the road. So Tuesdays, this coming Tuesday, we won't be having a Lunch and Learn, but we'll follow up on the next Thursday with our data science team. And then we've got a governance one coming the week after that. Lots of thanks for multiple people. Michelle says, thanks, Dan and Eddie. Never thank me. It's always our fantastic guests who join us. Scott, this was great. Would love to see these examples in the community instance. Let's work on that. We'll get that in. So everybody can happen. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. We'll join you again next Thursday. So mark your calendars. Appreciate it.